Hi, Regina. How are you?
I'm good, Vanya. How are you?
I'm good. I hope that you have had a lovely summer. I know we're getting ready to get back to school, and with that, there's a million questions probably on the students and mentors, and especially for those to be seniors. So I wanted to just take this opportunity to talk to you a little bit more about what to expect this year and talk a little bit more about senior mentoring and what your plans are for this upcoming year.
Awesome. That sounds great. Yeah, I'm excited to kind of iron out all the details about what it means to be a senior mentor.
For sure. So I kind of want to ask a little bit more about you and like how did you become involved in Enroot before we go into that presentation because I think you've been around with us for a few years now and I would love to hear your story of how you got here.
Totally, yeah. So I started at Enroot just about 2 years ago as an AmeriCorps Mass Promise Fellow. So I worked on the Cambridge team. I worked with the Cambridge Leadership and Emergent, actually the Somerville and Cambridge Explore cohorts because it was COVID and we did a lot of like collaborations with those cohorts at the time. And that I did that role for a year, and then I joined Enroot full time as the post-secondary associate just about a year ago.
That's amazing, Regina. And can you tell me if um, you have a preferred pronoun by any chance or anything that we might make your communication accessible between you and the mentors and the students?
Yeah, I use the she and they pronouns.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So tell me a little bit more about the senior program that you have been, you know, started to pilot. I know it's brand new, it's only a year old. So I would love to hear a little bit more of like what is the program itself and why is this important?
Totally, yeah. So, like you said, it's kind of still in its pilot stages. Previous to this being, I'm the first full-time person in this role. Previously, it had been done by AmeriCorps fellows, and so there was a lot of turnover. And we're really in a stage at Enroot of kind of really trying to build out this program. So, right now, how the program looks is working with seniors for all of their senior year and juniors in the spring, thinking about life after high school. So, whether that's employment or higher education, we support students pursuing any of those tracks and others, like military or starting a business or doing a job training program. Whatever the student wants to do en route, we'll figure out a way to support them.
That's awesome. So should we start jumping into the slides and you can walk me what we're gonna do today?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome. So let me share my slideshow. So tell us a little bit of the roadmap for today.
Yeah, so the lineup for today is talking a bit more in depth about Enroot's what Enroot Senior Program is, the structure of the program, and then diving into where the mentors come in. So what are the responsibilities and expectations of what it means to mentor a student through their senior year through 12th grade. And then just kind of wrapping up with like the nitty-gritty dates of programs and contacts, just kind of the FYIs.
Awesome. That sounds great. So tell me how the vision of this program, what is a little bit more of the big picture? I know you already explained to me the function, but maybe the full vision of this will be amazing as well.
Yeah, so this is just kind of the program overview, our vision. We aim to support juniors and seniors as they plan for and prepare to pursue post-secondary education and or employment. And we do this through workshops and one-on-one support. And like it says, led by the post-secondary associate, which is me, but in very close collaboration with Braylon Bethia, who's the director of college success, and also both site program directors at Cambridge and Somerville.
Awesome. And Regina, tell me what is one highlight that you've seen as important for Enroot to have this program? Like, have you seen any changes or anything that, have
Yeah.
sparked interest between mentors and students as they're going into their senior year?
Yeah, I think this program is so important as for our students just because especially those students who are college bound, it's a really challenging process to navigate. Even I remember when I was in 12th grade feeling just like so underwater and confused and overwhelmed, and especially if your parents haven't gone through that college process or it's a second language, there's just a lot to navigate. So having as many people sort of on the student's team, so to speak, is a game changer and really, really helpful. And for students who aren't college bound, it's so helpful to have input and people to give advice and people to be a sounding board about what you want your journey to look like. So I think it's a really special program, and I'm really excited to continue building it out.
Cool. So tell me a little bit more about the program then.
Yeah, so these are the program components. Yeah, just like what the program kind of looks like. Mainly, the two big things, which we'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide, are the monthly workshops and the mentoring tasks. So, our monthly workshops are an hour and a half long on the first Wednesday for the Cambridge cohort and the first Thursday for Somerville of the month. And these topics range from budgeting, financial aid, working on the college essay, scholarship research. There are a lot of different topics covered tailored to whether a student is college bound or bound for like a workforce or job training program. Next, and we have it set up so that they're at the beginning of the month. So at those workshops, we can kind of outline what the specific tasks and priorities that students and mentors should be working on for the remainder of the month. So then from that point on, for the rest of, say, October, you and your student will know what you should be tackling during those mentoring nights or whenever it is that you meet, if you meet outside of mentoring nights. Another place for students to get support are weekly drop-in hours, which I hold at either Cambridge Ringe and Latin or Somerville High School. And this is an optional time for students to drop in and check in with me and get sort of additional support on those mentoring tasks that you and your student will be working on throughout the year. So if they want extra help with their essay or whatever the case may be, they can drop in and get some extra support.
For sure. And how do students get to know what your office hours are?
Yeah, those will definitely be sort of emailed out and announcements, and I'll talk about this later, but we'll be rolling out a post-secondary senior program Instagram account for students to get updates and reminders about things like that as well.
That's amazing. I haven't heard of this before, so it's news to me as well.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. We know that students have a hard time with email, so I'm like, maybe Instagram is the key
You
for
never
the younger
know.
generation. Then we also will have check-ins, which I will do every about 4 to 6 weeks with students to just see how things are going and see what additional support they need. And once per semester for mentors. As always, of course, additional meetings as needed are totally welcome. Whatever you need support with or want to check in about, I'm here for, but those are kind of the more structured check-ins that we'll have.
Yeah. And I had a question about that.
Yeah.
Like, do mentors can email you directly, or is it like, how could they reach you if they had immediate questions?
Yeah, email or text or a Calendly link, whatever is easiest for them, but those are the three main ways to kind of set something up with me.
Awesome.
And then the last two pieces are our collaborations and our resources. So we have a lot of great partnerships in the greater Boston area, namely You Aspire for our like financial aid stuff is a super helpful partnership that we have. We also hope to have more external workshops from more facilitators who are external to the organization coming and facilitating, and field trips like college tours and things like that coming in the fall and spring.
Can you tell me about what Uspire is for those of us who don't know what Uspire is?
Yeah, definitely. So You Aspire is, I believe, a national level nonprofit that focuses on financial aid literacy for mostly low income and first gen college students. So there is a You Aspire representative at Cambridge and Somerville. It's the same person, which is really nice for us, who we can refer students to get one-on-one financial aid support. They also do trainings for Enroot staff and just like young education professionals in the area who work with students on the college application process and things like that. They're a really great organization, so you'll definitely be getting lots of emails about You Aspire resources from me throughout the year.
That's awesome. And so tell me a little bit more about your bi-monthly newsletters. Like, what do they contain or what they will be potentially containing and why is it important to read them?
Totally, yeah. So the bi-monthly newsletters, that's every other month, will come out and they will include announcements about events or opportunities for students, some words of encouragement, a recap of what's gone on over the last couple of months, and announcements and things like that. They're a great place to find scholarships that your students might be interested in applying to, or other extracurriculars that might fit your students' needs or interests. And most things that are included in the newsletter will also be on the senior website. The senior website is a tool that I am very proud of. It's something I've spent a lot of time on, and I think it's very helpful. I hope you all find it to be helpful. And there's just a lot there for students and mentors alike.
Okay, so here is the kind of the structure and like how you envision the program functioning for the next academic year.
Yes, exactly. And right here in the corner, as you can see, is the Enroot Senior website link. That will also be included in all of my emails, and I recommend that you bookmark it. So jumping in a little bit more detailed to what I talked about earlier about the how I envision the workshops and the mentoring nights sort of pairing and partnering. Like I said, we'll lay out the priorities for each month at the end of each workshop. So if the topic of the workshop is financial aid, at the end of the workshop, we will lay out a couple, like 3 or 4 tasks or projects or activities that you and your student can work on over the next couple of mentoring nights in that month. So then the next time you meet with your student, you can either pull up the email that I send after each workshop or refer to the senior website and click on the month that we're in and get a sense of what you and your student could be working on. Most, if not all, of the tasks will be linked to a Google Doc that will give you even more resources and even more kind of step-by-step instructions on how to go through that task or activity.
Awesome. And then can you tell me a little bit more about like how it will be I know there are calendars and updates and reminders, but do mentors need to constantly check the website, the senior website to like see where the updates are or like what ways of communication would you be using to, to whole community?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say mostly checking email. Emails will go out after, like the day or two after each workshop, and the email will cover what was covered in the workshop as well as links to the priorities for the rest of the month. So the email might be like the easiest way to like stay in touch with what you want to be focusing on, but the website also has all that information as well, hold in one place.
Awesome. And so for mentors and students who might be pivoting to a non-traditional route,
Mm-hmm.
what are some ways in which they can get information or resources? Like what is the process for that?
Yeah, so we have the same structure for students who are bound for the workforce or a job training program. It will just look a little bit different. So when a college-bound student might be focusing on a scholarship application, a student who's bound for the workforce or a job training program might be focusing on trying to set up an informational interview or doing some career exploration activities or working on a resume. So we've created a whole curriculum for students who are workforce bound as well.
Amazing. And so basically everybody gets a little bit of the same information and just tailored depending on what path you're on. And at the same time, it's important to come to these monthly workshops, right? Regardless of what your path is, because why?
Yeah, exactly. So we work really hard to make sure that the workshops are applicable to all students, regardless of what path they're on. So it's definitely encouraged to attend the workshops. And if you can't attend the workshops, there's a slide on this later. We do encourage you to cover the material afterwards, and you can even fill out a Google form once you've covered the material and get credit for attending the workshop, even if you weren't able to make it in person for that exact meeting.
Okay, so I definitely get points for showing up and just like going through the assignment with my student then.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. Awesome. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what the website has.
Yes, absolutely. So this is just kind of an example of what we talked about on the last slide. Like, for example, this is where you would go for September, and as you can see where they're underlined, that takes you to a Google Doc link with more detailed information. So say for example, Vanya and I are mentor-mentee pair, we're meeting, and we go to the senior website and we go to workshop materials and resources. We click on college bound because I'm a student applying to college. And then we would say, okay, we already created my college list. Let's create a common account. Let's click the link on number 4 to get more information about how to create a common app account. So that's just kind of to give you a sense of what it looks like.
That's amazing. So every month the list will just keep growing depending on the resources and materials we're covering.
Absolutely. Yep.
Great. And then for financial aid, like Undocu Plus, I know that you'll be touching base a little bit more about this too, but all of this is in the senior website. So now, like, all of it is there. Cool. Amazing. Okay, so tell me, what are some of the rules for our mentors? This is such a pivotal time for students because they're making really big decisions. And I know that a lot of the mission at Enroot is to support students' goals. And so as active adults in students' life, as Enroot staff, as mentors, like, what are some things that we need to be looking out for, especially when we're talking to a senior, or
Yeah.
my role as a senior mentor?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, what does it mean? Where do you come
Yeah.
in? So, as you can sort of tell by all of these resources and all of these workshops, seniors have a lot going on, whether they're college bound or not. There's just a lot on their plates. And what we know about Enroute students and the demographics of the students we're working with is they have even more going on outside of school. Many students at Enroute work many hours a week to also financially support their families, and we've seen that increase since COVID as well. So where you can come in is helping them stay organized, using these mentoring nights to check things off their to-do list so they can take it off their plate and not worry about it, reminding them about due dates coming up, just being that extra support of staying organized and staying on top of things. With that being said, though, we also want to be responsive. If you can tell that your student is feeling like really underwater and really stressed, address that and remind them of self care and remind them to take care of their mental health. We don't want mentoring nights to be uber productive or rigid or strict or stressful if that's not serving the student ultimately. Yeah, which brings me to the next point of be supportive. Like, if your student needs a break and needs to just decompress and talk about something silly or not think about college for a week, do that. Students often just need a listening ear. They don't necessarily always need advice or a pep talk. They just sometimes need someone to know that they have someone in their corner, that they have someone that they can vent to, and someone who like cares about them and wants to listen. So those are like the first 3 things that I think really make a strong senior mentor. The next one is be communicative. This is both like with your student and with Enroute. Um, yeah, kind of like I was saying, reminders and being in touch with them, checking in on how they're doing. It's also sometimes the case that a student might be working closer with me or working closer with their mentor. So making sure that that line of communication between myself and the mentor is there so that we are all on the same page of updates is really important as well. And the last one is to be flexible. Like we've talked about, students do have a lot on their plates, so they might throughout the course of the year wax and wane with their engagement with you and the program, and just sort of being adaptive and flexible to the many different competing interests in their lives is a really important thing always about mentorship, but in particular at this kind of crazy year in their lives.
No, that totally makes sense. And have you gotten, from last year, have you gotten any questions from mentors about their role, or some maybe useful tips that you might give the mentors, as students might feel really overwhelmed or feel like they're not ready, or like, I feel like as we all been through the process when we apply for college or we're getting ready for a new job, that we're like, what if it nothing works out, right? And so like
Yeah.
what are some tips that maybe a mentor could do when they're in that threshold?
Yeah, I think definitely knowing your student is really important. Like, what are my students' signs of stress? What are, if my student is, demonstrating XYZ tendency, this means they're really stressed, or this means they're really, behind on something, and what do they need? I would say also just asking your student, like, starting off at the beginning of the year, what does it look like when you're stressed? What helps you when you're stressed? What can I do to alleviate your stress? Having these conversations on the front end of your relationship can be really helpful and set a really nice foundation for support for the remainder of the year.
That's amazing. Okay, let's continue. So what happens if somebody misses a workshop?
Like we've been talking about, students have a lot going on. You have a lot going on, so we get it. I would say be sure to read the email that goes out after the workshop. That, like we said, that email will cover everything that was covered in the workshop and align what you should be covering for the rest of the month. So make a plan to cover that material at your next workshop, and then fill out that Google form so you can get credit for the workshop that you missed, and to make sure that you're staying on track. Yes, it's good to get the credit, but it's also, even better to just get that material covered. One thing to note is that if a mentor has to miss the workshop but the student is able to attend, the student should still attend. Please encourage your student to attend the workshop even if you have to miss it. They can always work with an Enroot staff member, or pair up with a friend and the friend's mentor, and still get that material covered, which is really awesome and important.
Super important, because it's not about the mentor coming in at times, it's about the student receiving the information, right? So it doesn't feel like they're behind.
Yep, exactly.
Great. And so, Regina, I have a question also before we jump into times. And it's like,
Yeah.
what happens if you have a student who's on DocuPlus and they're showing up, but as you know, it could be really tricky. Like, what are some ways in which we can support our undocumented students?
Yeah, so the college, in terms of the college process especially, it looks a little bit different for undocumented students. I would say, sort of backing up a little bit, we never want to ask our students directly what their immigration status is. If a student gets to decide when, how, and even if they share that information with you, likely during the kind of college process, or even applying for jobs in the workforce, that information might come up sort of in a more subtle way, like a student saying, oh, I don't have a social security number, or oh, I don't qualify for federal aid. So definitely always just being as like gracious and thoughtful when that information is shared with you. If a student shares it directly with you, kind of thanking them for trusting you with that information, clarifying how confidential they obviously want you to keep that information. Enroot does have resources for supporting undocumented students through the college application process, scholarships that students can apply for, and things like that. It definitely is a little bit of a different process for students who are undocumented and has its own set of challenges. But like keeping in communication with Enroot and finding other ways, especially for funding that education, is super important to stay on top of.
For sure. And Enroot also provides legal support through the RIAN Center. And
Yes.
so so if we hear of a student who needs a little bit more of advice or needs to understand their status, we can always connect them to that resource, because then the RIAN Center can do a one-time conversation or appointment with the student to just assess where they are in the process.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder, Vanya. That's so true. And one other thing I will say, speaking of sort of like learning, if you are uncertain about what a student's status means, I would definitely say the internet is your friend and Enroot staff are your friend. You shouldn't rely on your student to sort of educate you about what their status means.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, we're always here to support mentors in especially trying to understand what it all means. If a student happens to be undocumented, or if a student happens to have a refugee status or asylum status, like, we are able to provide that information, and we also have resources on what that means. So please, please, please always reach out to us, especially with sensitive information like this.
Totally.
But tell me, what are the times to meet?
Yeah, awesome. So for Cambridge, we will be meeting the first Wednesday of every month from 6 to 7:30. Something to note about the Cambridge time. So on weeks where the senior workshops take place, the regularly scheduled Tuesday mentoring is optional. We want to be thoughtful, obviously, about everything that you all have going on in your lives. So we wouldn't expect you to attend on Tuesday and Wednesday. So you can skip the Tuesday mentoring when you are attending the senior workshops on Wednesday. For Somerville, they would take place at the same time as regular mentoring, so the first Thursday of every month from 6 to 7:30. One thing I'll note about the structure of the workshops is usually the second half of the workshop will just be work time between student and mentors. So if you or your student are feeling really burnt out, you don't always have to stay for the full hour and a half, especially if the last portion is work time. If you feel like you've gotten a lot done, you're in good shape, the time would be better spent heading home for dinner, that's okay. That's usually how they're going to be structured. Sometimes we'll use that full hour and a half, but I do want to say that it's not always going to be that full hour and a half for
But
the
it's
workshops.
important to show up because you should learn all these things, right?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. You should always show up. It's just sometimes you might be able to leave at 7:05 instead of 7:30.
Perfect.
And like it says in the corner, the senior program Google Calendar is linked to the homepage of the senior website. So if you need to reference the dates there, that's where they are. Also on that calendar are any like additional trainings or workshops that are optional that might be helpful for students to attend.
And is the senior website has a code or anything, or is it like an open source link?
Open source link, yeah.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Okay, so Regina, tell us how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, so you can get a hold of me through this email, rcarey@enrooteducation.org, or that cell phone number listed up there. I also will have my Calendly link in the signature of all of my emails if that's an easier way to just put yourself on my calendar so we can chat. And here are just some additional contacts of folks that work closely with seniors and with me in my role as
Amazing.
well.
You carry so many hats. But thank you so much, Regina. If we have any other questions, we'll definitely come to you, especially when it comes to senior mentoring specifically.
Yes.
So we'll definitely, hopefully this video was informational. Let us know if you have any questions. We'll be able to provide the answers to you. But Regina, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Vanya.